Everybody knows that a swim bait rigged on a jig head catches fish all over the country, but it has a downfall. How many times have you thrown a swim bait into an area that you were like, I am going to get bit right here, and you get it hung on a rock, you get it hung on a limb, you get it hung on the brush pile you were fishing, or whatever you happen to be fishing at that moment, you get it hung up on your primary spot that you might even be looking at them on Panoptics to see that there's fish down there, but now you're hung up and you have to break it off, and a lot of times your opportunity is gone out the window. I would raise my hand to that, and I almost guarantee every single one of you guys watching that would. So how do you get around that? Well, after you watch this, you will never fish a swim bait the same way when you're fishing around cover, and that is because they have found an all new way to rig it, and that is on a Tokyo rig. What you have in a Tokyo rig, everybody's seen it, how you flip grass with it, flip wood with it, etc. It is a hook that comes standard with a wire piece right below it, and what you do is you put a tungsten or lead weight on the wire and crimp it up, right? You have a little swivel, you have a split ring, and what you do is you take, and now instead of putting a beaver or, a palmetto bug or a goat or whatever the bait you happen to want to throw on there, now you put a swim bait on it. And now you can see that is weedless. Now you can feel the bottom. You can actually work your bait through the cover, and that is the beautiful part about this, okay? Instead of trying to guesstimate or just keep your swim bait just above the brush pile, I can now fish this bait straight through the brush pile. And what are some of the advantages of that? The beautiful part about that is when you're trying to cover a ledge, if you're on the Tennessee River, if you're trying to fish a brush pile on your home lake, etc., even if you're trying to fish a bluff bank. Okay, now what you can do is you can actually let your bait go to the bottom, feel the bottom, and you can even crawl that bait along the bottom, and you can get reaction strikes just like you would with a crankbait. The beautiful part about a crankbait is as it's diving, it ricochets off stuff, and that's when you get your bites. Well, now you can do the exact same thing with a swim bait. Okay, so as that's coming down through there, it's going to hit, and it's going to deflect, and you can pop it right over it just like you would with a crankbait or a jig. So you can fish your bait just like you would a jig, and you can get a swim bait into places you typically wouldn't have been able to before, ever. And another beautiful part is what this does is this gives this bait so much more action, because typically when you're trying to fish deep, you have a swim bait with a head, and you have to weight the head in order to get the bait to the depth you want it. If you want to fish 30 foot with a swim bait, you got to put a heavier head on there, or you got to put lighter line on there, etc. And what that does is the more you weight this, the more action that takes out of the bait itself. So as you weight this, it's not going to have as much rock, and it's not going to have as much roll to it, and it's not going to look as natural. Well, when you're fishing it on a Tokyo rig, you're weighting down here. You're not even weighting the actual swim bait. So what that's going to do is that swim bait is going to have the same kick. Like you can see I'm holding right here. This weight isn't moving, but I can sit there and move this bait back and forth because it's not actually attached to the swim bait itself. There's a welded split ring right there, and it's attached to that, and the bait itself, the hook, is attached to that. So there's a link there that you can see that weight down there moves freely. And that's what's going to give your swim bait a ton more action. And you can downsize the hook to fish whatever size hook you want. So where you could throw really, really small swim baits on it if you want to throw a teeny little swim bait on it, or if you want to throw something like this big Z-Man swim bait, or even that middle of the road diesel minnow. You can match the bait fish size with the swim bait you're throwing and get it into places where other people typically couldn't. This is going to allow you to cover water extremely, extremely fast going forward in the future, and it's going to allow you to cover all different depth zones. So now what you can do is if you have a brush pile out there, because a swim bait is a phenomenal brush pile bait, you can tick the top of it without having to worry about your swim bait rolling over when it hits a limb and getting stuck in it. Then you can make a cast on either side of it, running it along the laydown and not have to worry about it hooking the limb. And then what you can do is you can worm it through that brush pile. You can cast it out, let it sink all the way to the bottom, and crawl it through that laydown to where that swim bait's just going to be barely kicking and rolling. Now, why do I bring this up this time of year? Well, it works phenomenal in the summertime when you're out there ledge fishing, you're out fishing deep brush piles and stuff. But the closest thing we have to summertime fishing is wintertime fishing, right? It's snowing like crazy out. I have like 1.5 feet at my house, literally right now as I'm sitting in here. That's why I'm all layered up. And those fish are going to get out in the same deep water areas, except in the wintertime, they feed more on bait fish probably than they do all the rest of the year. You have that fall period where all the bait fish are moving back up shallow, and that's when those fish really start to key in on that. And so they just carry that forward into the winter. Right now we're in that transition. I'm obviously winter up here, but if you're down south, You're not there yet. You're still in that mid-fall era. So that's why I'm bringing it up right now, is because now you can fish that bait through the areas where those fish are going to be holding in the deep water. So let's talk about the gear that I'm going to throw this on, because all I have to do is adjust this weight now. So it doesn't really matter what line size I throw it on necessarily. I can get away with a lot heavier line because I don't have to worry about my swim bait, etc. I'm fishing the exact same setup. All I'm going to do is change this weight. So if I want to go from 10 feet, I might have a 1/4 ounce weight, to 30 feet, I might put a 3/8 ounce weight on there. Even 50 feet, for you smallmouth guys, I can put a 1/2 ounce weight on there. So what line size am I going to run that on? Well, if I'm running the very stereotypical setup where I have, looks like a 3/0 hook on there with a big swim bait like this, I'm going to run something along the lines of 20 pound. And I like P-Line Tactical Fluorocarbon. That's my personal favorite. The line size runs a smidge heavier, but I like that that gives it a little bit more abrasion resistance to some of the standard other, lines in the industry. Now, if I'm going to go down and throw something in this 3.5 inch, this diesel minnow and a 4 inch, then I might go down and throw 15 pound P-Line Tactical Fluorocarbon. And that goes for the same reasons that I just talked about with the line size, right? It has a little bit more abrasion resistance when I'm fishing it around cover, when I'm fishing it down on ledges and I'm dragging it along the bottom. And that brings me to another point. When you're fishing a swim bait, if you bump a rock, that rock's right here, your swim bait's going to run right into it, and that's going to cause your line to get, nipped right on that knot. Well, because of this, I'm feeling here, I'm not feeling it up here. So traditionally, your head is what you feel, right? When it bumps a rock, that's the swim bait head hitting the rock. Now I have this tungsten weight, which by the way is going to make it even easier for me to feel what my bait is doing. It's going to hit down here instead of up here. So my line is going to be 10 times more protected because I have an extra 2 inches off the bottom right there to give me a little bit of a cushion when I bump the bottom. Obviously, when you're pulling it, it's going to be a little bit more like this. But either way, that's going to give me a better connection to my knot, not getting hit on the bottom all the time. Obviously, when you're going up over big boulders and stuff like that, it's going to be a little bit different. But now it's not going to get stuck in there, and it's going to keep it up a little bit away from having to climb all the way over, especially because it has this swivel on there. So it'll allow it to move a little bit instead of it being pinched in one position and hitting my knot all the time. It'll roll that swivel over and give me a little bit more protection on that knot. So the rod that I'm going to throw this on is going to be a 7/6 heavy or medium heavy, because what I like to do is I have that big standard hook on there. Okay, now obviously if you're throwing it on a 1/4 ounce weight with a smaller swim bait, you might want to downsize to a 7-foot medium heavy. But if I'm fishing ledges and I'm fishing deep brush piles and stuff like that, I have the line size. Now I want to have the gear to get them out of there. Okay, and that's why I go with that 7/6. I'm going to pair it with either a 6:3 to 1 gear ratio reel or a 7:2 to 1 gear ratio reel. I'm not going to go real fast and I'm not going to go real slow. A swim bait is traditionally a slow fishing bait, especially when I'm fishing it down there on the bottom like that. So that lower gear ratio is going to give me more power and more torque to pull that fish up out of that cover. And it's just going to give me the leverage power with that longer rod, that 7/6. When I make that long cast, because that 7/6 is going to give me more length to throw that bait further, now when I'm reeling it, my hook set is going to be even more powerful. So I can get them away from the brush pile, away from the rock, away from whatever I happen to be fishing on, and then that low gear ratio reel is going to allow me to winch those suckers back to the boat. So obviously if you're throwing a smaller swim bait and you want to use a faster gear ratio reel because you're burning it, and you just don't want to get it caught in laydowns and stuff like that, because you can fish this super shallow as well and get away with it. But typically I would go with like a weedless underspin or something at that point. But that is the beautiful part about this bait right here, and that is 100% why you should be picking one of these up. They're available at fishusa.com. I will have everything linked down below as I always do. But thank you guys so much for watching. And if you guys haven't already, be sure to check out this video where I talk about how I made the Bassmaster Classic for 2023. That's right, I will be fishing the Bassmaster Classic. Check that out, see the journey I made to get there, and keep following along with the channel. But again, God bless you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, and y'all have a great night.